Hello, and welcome to the first seminar. Thank you very much for attending. I think the microphone's necessary I'm guessing for the camera rather than for you guys, because we can probably all hear. My name's Toby Heysham. I run a low-carbon engineering business outside Carlisle, as well as a family farm outside Carlisle. And this is a very neat and exciting joint between the two, low-carbon farming, match the two together. This is the first time we've done seminars at Dairy Expo, which is very exciting. To follow on from the seminar program at the Agri Expo last year. Today we're trying to get the link, and I suppose it couldn't be a more relevant time. We've got power and gas prices going through the roof. We were just talking about it now. Power used to be able to buy 15p a unit. You're now buying it for 45, 55p a unit. And that has a big impact. You then look at Ukraine and you look at the food prices and you look at massive output requirement, and then the input costs coming on the way through. And it becomes clear that the challenge to hit productivity and net zero becomes more and more important. I think we're going to struggle to find a more relevant time to have this discussion. I suppose the really big and important part of this is that farming for so long has been the darling of the public perception. It's been really popular. Everyone's always had a very fond view, and increasingly we have to accept that there is a diminishing of that. And I think that is firstly, it's not fair, and secondly, it's not a particularly good place to be. And I think now is the time for us to talk about this internally within the community as well as externally, and show that actually we are all on a journey towards zero carbon. We are not a negative contributor to the UK story, and we are providing a public good. And so I think this conversation and the conversations around it are going to be absolutely critical to turning that dial. What can we provide back, and not just be seen as a competitor for the airline industry in terms of carbon. So this seminar is meant to be discursive, chat, talk to us. We're going to have a couple of quick intros, and then we really want to get conversation going and really want to get discussion. So please jump in. Ryan's going to go first. He founded Go Low Carbon 7 years ago, and really aiming at buying better, buying greener, being more self-reliant, and being less and able to deliver your business in a more efficient manner. Go Carbon works with businesses to help them measure and understand their carbon footprint, and then set carbon reduction targets and provide practical guidance to help them reach their goals. So Ryan, over to you.
Great, thank you very much, Toby. So I'm sitting here not as a farming expert, as a carbon expert, I suppose. So a lot of this I might actually turn around and ask as many questions as answer them today. Our background, as well as being in energy, we do carbon audits for a range of businesses across all sectors, particularly hospitality. And it's interesting to hear the questions that those guys have asked. And it's hopefully the questions that a lot of you are sitting here now wondering. And maybe the best place for me to start is to try and demystify a little bit of the carbon jargon that is associated with everything. And particularly the phrase for the seminar of net zero. I don't know if everyone's got a full understanding of what net zero really means. I don't think anyone really has, to be honest. And part of this is the fact that we're having this conversation because it's almost being forced upon it. There's a pressure here on the farming sector, a pressure from, as Toby mentioned, from the public, change of perception, but also top down from the likes of the milk takers as well. And to try and understand this and make the right changes, you've got to be able to engage in it. So starting off with literally what is net zero, and you'll hear phrases like carbon neutral as well, and there is a difference between the two. Achieving net zero essentially means the carbon emissions from the farm are equaled out by the carbon absorbed and sequestered through any operations on the farm, through trees and grassland and anything else like that as well, which is very different from carbon neutral. A lot of businesses, big businesses at the moment, they claim to be carbon neutral, which essentially means they have a carbon footprint and they've chosen to offset it by purchasing credits from a totally different operation and usually from a different part of the world. So asking farming to achieve net zero is a much bigger task. than what the big companies are trying to achieve themselves. They're asking for you guys to achieve total parity on farm without buying in carbon credits. So thankfully, it's not something that I've been tasked with, and I'd be interested to hear from Tom later on. But essentially, when we're working with a business, it's a carbon audit is a business efficiency audit. To reduce your carbon footprint, you're improving your efficiency, reducing your inputs, and hopefully lowering your operational costs as well. So essentially, we're in the business of sustainability, and that's how it needs to be treated. Engaging with a carbon audit is about looking at your overheads and how you can improve that. And that's obviously, as Toby mentioned, very apt at the moment with fertiliser approaching £1,000 a tonne this week, is it? And I say energy's tripled in price since September, feed prices, everything across the board's going up. So what do you do to try and reduce those inputs? So as I say, I'm going to sit and listen to a lot of this, but my little 2 pence worth, if you like, focusing on energy. Energy is the big thing at the moment for me, but it's also something that a lot of farmers can do better. And rather than sleepwalking into getting a shock 2 months before your contract ends to find out that you're going to be paying £40,000 a year for your energy, it's managing it now and making the most of any opportunities that are there at the moment. For example, for anyone who's in Scotland, anyone here that might be in Scotland, as of the 1st of April, there's a 100% interest-free loan for anything to do with energy efficiency or renewable energy. That includes solar panels as well. It's been engaged in this, getting aware of all of this and making the most of it before someone else does. Energy buy-in, we manage around about £21 million worth of energy buy-in. A good chunk of that is for the agricultural sector. And in the last 18 months, our clients have saved £900,000 by engaging in their energy contract. And that isn't just by comparing one supplier to the other, it's about treating your energy costs like your fertiliser costs. Everyone's talking about buying fertiliser in advance ready for next year with the expectation that prices go up. I've had people saying they're buying hay for next year now before it gets any more expensive. But I get very few people talking to me saying, I'm going to look at locking in my energy contract 12 months in advance. So they're not treating it like a commodity that goes up and down with price. And that is where most people will fall down, and that is where you will see people spending 20, 30, 40,000 pounds a year on their energy costs for 2023 and 2024. But you can do something about this by engaging in this, by working with a farm consultant or with a broker like ourselves. We're helping people manage that market, set insurance policies in place, so you're setting the highest price that you're going to pay for your energy, but then following the market to capitalise on any falls that might come along in the next 12 months. We've got a stand today, and we've already been very busy this morning talking about solar panels as well. It's something that's been in the doldrums for quite a few years. There was a flurry. I know H&H have got some solar panels from about 10 years ago, and it was fantastic. But everyone stopped talking about it because they just made the assumption that without a subsidy, solar wasn't worth looking at, or wind turbines weren't worth looking at anymore. But again, it's about being open to these ideas and revisiting them. And what most people don't understand is the misconception there is actually solar has now got a payback of as little as 4 to 5 years. That's a 20% return on investment. At the same time, there's 130% capital allowance being offered, but that's starting to run out. There's, for anyone in the Lake District, there's a 60% grant that you can claim for solar panels as well. I'm starting to turn into a bit of a sales pitch here, but what I'm trying to say is there is support out there for people who want to engage in managing their carbon footprint and lowering their operational costs that come from it. I'm just talking about one very niche sector, but I'm sure this applies across the board. But by measuring your carbon footprint and understanding the implications of the inputs and the costs that you're putting into your business, then you can start to understand and flag the areas where you can make the biggest improvements, both in your productivity and in your operational costs as well. So we're all feeling the squeeze, but there is the opportunity there to spend a little bit of money or a little bit of time engaging with someone to try and improve that, I suppose. And, that was my pitch.
Brilliant. So I thought what we'd do is we'd have a couple of questions now, and then we'll move on to Tom, just to sort of get things going. But while you're thinking of the question, I thought I'd ask a question first to allow. So you've got your interest-free loan and you've got your solar panels. We'll assume they're done. Mm-hmm. But what else do you do? You know, what are the practical things? You know, you've got your biomass, but that seems to have gone away. You've got your heat pumps. That seems. What should we be looking at? What are the clever people looking at the moment?
I think keep it simple, really. It's looking at the basics. LED lighting has been around for such a long time. There's been a lot of grant funding available for it. That's been and gone. It pays itself back, but still the amount of farms that we turn up to where cubicle sheds are on 6-foot halogen strip lights, a bit like, maybe not in here. Yeah, but yeah. But it's amazing. People just aren't taking a little bit of time to look at those quick wins. We're not trying to overcomplicate it. Heat pumps, biomass boilers, that was all fantastic, and there was people that really improved their efficiency with that. But it is just simply looking at the basics. Apart from swapping out the LED lights, it's as simple as timers. A couple of £100, and your electrician does it, you do it yourself. But again, turning cubicle lights off at the right time. And these things might be marginal gains across the whole turnover of the farm, but it's hundreds of pounds or thousands of pounds that is being wasted, essentially. There are bigger, more exciting projects. I see AD is maybe potentially making a little bit of a comeback. There's people talking about that. But again, it's about weighing it up, and that's not going to be for the masses either. But the simple things, solar, LED lighting, looking at your energy tariff, it's amazing. The conversations that we'll have today are about energy bills. Who's your current energy supplier? And invariably what we'll get is, oh, I don't know, my wife deals with that. When does your contract come to an end? Oh, I don't know, my wife deals with that. And that's really dangerous, because if you haven't engaged in that, it'll already be too late for some people. Some people will be stuck on a 45, 50, 60 pence a unit tariff when they didn't need to be. They could have engaged in this 12 months in advance and been on 18 to 20 pence for the next 3 years.
That's very helpful. Sorry, Tom, go.
Can I ask Ryan, how much energy is green?
Yeah, well,
and which companies are supplying sort of the highest percentage of green energy?
Well, there's there is a whole debate about this, and I've some pretty strong opinions which would go further than what time we've got today. Things are greening up in the same way we're talking about carbon, because we're feeling the pressure of improving our carbon footprint. Energy suppliers have had to move to be greener because they're feeling the pressure from suppliers. About 70% of our customer base choose the green tariff. And it's not always based on price, they're not always the cheapest, but if there's a misconception that green energy means it's going to be vastly more expensive. British Gas are classed as a carbon neutral tariff, 70% green, 30% nuclear. You've got some of the other big names. EDF is 100% nuclear. There's another debate there, but that is classed as being a carbon neutral tariff. Opus, Drax, they're all carbon neutral as well. You don't have to be trying to align yourself with a niche supplier to gain the advantage of that exercise, which could reduce your carbon footprint in one fell swoop. For a dairy farm, it could be as much as 5 or 8% of your carbon footprint, which has been reduced at no cost, no time, and very little input into it. But we work with about 25 different suppliers, and around about 7 of those are classed as a green tariff. There are pitfalls that you can fall into, and we've seen this with some Arla clients at the moment, where they think they're on a green energy tariff, and I won't mention any suppliers' names, but actually it's a carbon neutral tariff. It's the same old fossil fuel coal-fired power stations, but that supplier has chosen to offset their carbon and classed it as a carbon neutral tariff, and that doesn't count. There's a lot of greenwashing here, a lot of pitfalls that people can fall into, and it is just taking a little bit of advice there to make sure that you're doing the right thing for your business.
Okay, that's very helpful. For reference sake, the question was asked about where the power is coming from at the moment. Today, the power carbon output is a fifth of what it was 5 years ago on a standard. It's the massive reduction, and anyone in the farming sector can also provide. There is land available, so you can do a lot more of the delivery towards decarbonisation. So there is. If we do hydrogen the way they were planning to do, that will require 4 times the wind capacity we've got now. We're already the second biggest offshore wind producer in the world. So there is a massive opportunity for anyone to look at that as a diversification. Are there any questions to get us going?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Ryan, we talked about farmers producing carbon or offsetting their carbon, and then talk about picking selling them as units to these big carbon movers who are basically just exporting what they're doing to the farmer. Should we really be actually advising farmers and landowners to sell those units, or do you see a time in the future where they will need those units themselves?
I think this one might be one for Tom as well. No, we had a talk about it. Carbon credits is a little bit of a wild west at the moment, and it's a great marketing ploy for certain companies, but we're already seeing it. Innocent Smoothies was one last week where their advert was pulled because of greenwashing, and the danger is that we get asked by farmers all the time. I was at an event and how much is my carbon worth? But the first thing to understand is how much carbon have you got? There's maybe an assumption that because you're managing a large area of land, that surely you have a surplus amount of carbon emission. But Tom's obviously run this exercise, but my personal feeling is there isn't a lot of surplus carbon there to be sold, and if you do that, is it the right thing to do? Like you say, what's coming around the corner, and where's the value of it? Assuming it is the right thing to do, we were offered carbon credits at as little as £4 a tonne. There's a feeling after COP26, Toby, you might know this a number better than I do, but after COP26, they were going up to about £150 a tonne, and that's forecasted to keep on going as well. So, is it an opportunity to short-term cash out? It's a relatively small amount of money, but my feeling is it's going to be more important further down the line.
Yeah, just to add to that, it's something that we really need to keep up our sleeve. We're only sort of 2 years into doing on-farm carbon audits, and we're not actually counting the grassland or the forests and woods, hedgerows and things into the figure at the moment. So to get net zero by 2050, I think it's really something that the farmers have to keep in hand, and it'll come into use in future audits.
Just to add on briefly, that is to many carbon credits being the Wild West has been a view which I think many people share. I suspect many people in this room share. However, I would agree completely with Tom that there is the only way of decarbonising the entire UK economy is to have them. There's no alternative, and so there will be a major place for it, and people in this room will do very well out of it. And I think carbon credits could well be a replacement for BPS in the future. Tom, do you want to, over to you to reply if you want then.
Just another point on the carbon credits. I mean, some of the airlines are sort of advertising that they are carbon net zero by buying Scottish highlands and forests and things to offset the carbon. That's not doing one jot of good for the environment. Them forests and highlands were there beforehand, sucking up carbon, and the aeroplanes are still pumping out carbon. The only thing that it's doing is giving them a competitive edge over their competitors.
I wholeheartedly agree, and I think that therefore the place is accreditation. That's where we're going to end up. That's where companies like yourselves, I suspect, may end up find yourselves, because accreditation is going to be deciding that, and there are already standards stopping what you just described happening. Why don't you kick into your introduction and take us through, and then we'll get on to more questions afterwards.
Thank you, Toby. So as I'm sure you're all aware now, I'm Tom Neill of Thornington Farm, Mindrum, Northumberland, farming in partnership with my wife Nicola, brother David and parents George and Mary. We are farming 320 British Friesian cows, 1,800 sheep, and approximately 1,000 acres of arable. Thornington Farm is 740 acres. It's on a 3-generation tenancy, of which I'm the 2nd generation. Doonham Farm next door is 585 acres, which we bought in 1996. And in 2018, we bought a further 200 acres of bare ground on a neighbouring farm. We also rent another 1,150 acres of seasonal grass and arable ground in the locality, which gives us a total of just over 2,600 acres. Cropping is pretty much a 3-way split between winter barley, winter wheat and spring barley. We're continually rotating silage and cropping fields with a full reseeding programme in place. We run a full complement of machinery with only hedge cutting and groundworks done by outside contractors. The herd of cows are yielding approximately 7,900 litres. They're 6 months housed, 6 months grazed. They are fed to yield in the parlour using a 7-day average, and they get a TMR when housed. The diet is grass silage, whole crop, urea-treated grain, protected rape meal, UK grown, or a protein blend depending on prices and time of year. Bull and heifers and in-calf heifers are outwintered on kale and baled silage. We are producing approximately 2.5 million litres on an ALA 360 contract aligned with Aldi. Average pence per litre for the year 2021 was 34.8 pence per litre. Cows are currently producing 640 kilograms of milk solids per lactation, which is approximately 1 kilogram of milk solids per 1 kilogram of live weight. Cows are housed in a fully slatted cupola shed with 5 months slurry storage underneath in a Dutch slalom system. We also have various straw-bedded pens for fresh calvers, dry cows and young stock. All male calves are castrated and reared to finishing as steers. Limmers and cross heifers are sold as bull and heifers to my older brother Robert. And we also sell excess Frisian heifers as fresh calved milkers through the ring here at Carlisle. Cull cows are all dried off and put into a fattening pen for approximately 2 months. Aiming for a high health status herd, the cows are vaccinated for IBR, BVD, lepto. Quarterly testing for Johne's is carried out with a strict culling policy for any J5s that show up, although we have not found any for 2 years now. Mobility scoring is carried out every 3 months and recorded. AHDB score cows 1 and 2 is currently running at 4%, and score cows 3 is at 0%. Just a few facts and figures. We have a preg rate of 32%, calving interval of 362 days, pregnancy to first insemination at 60%, cell counts currently running at 140, 100-day in-calf rate is 78%, cow mortality is 2%, and 1 to 28-day calf mortality is 0.5%. Some investments over the last few years. In 2012, we built a new slatted cupola shed, and I'm pleased to say the lights in that are on timers and daylight sensors. So actually, since that shed was built, I've never touched the light switch. They go on and off with daylight sensors and timers. 2015, we put in a new De Laval 28 milking parlour, and also in 2015, we built a new dedicated calf shed. 2018, 2 new 2,000-tonne silage pits were built, and in 2021, a new 2,000-tonne grain store built. So what have we done to improve our carbon footprint? Slurry storage, we went from only a week's capacity to 5 months capacity, which had made a massive difference on our fertiliser usage. Previously, we were spreading slurry every week of the winter. We had to spread slurry somewhere. Now, we'd spread no slurry from July to February, and the silage ground all gets a covering late February, early March, and then it all gets another covering straight after first cut is lifted. And it's also now applied with a dribble bar rather than a splash plate. Reducing age at first calving. This is an ongoing improvement, so we have less unproductive animals on farm. Outwintering in calf and bull and heifers on kale. which has reduced concentrate bought-in, improving soil organic levels, and is a good break crop the kale in our reseeding policy. Feeding a UK grown protected rape meal instead of imported soya. We've done several trials to see if there's any negative impact on milk quality, fertility, general cow health and performance, which we saw nothing to make us switch back to soya, as long as the price difference wasn't too great. Milk and parlour concentrates are now available with no soya or palm in them, and I've been working with Wool Valley farmers who are now showing the carbon footprint of their products on the feed label. For example, our current Momentum 18 cake has a carbon footprint of 1.02 kilograms of carbon per kilogram of dry matter. But with a bit of tweaking with ingredients, they now produce a low carbon footprint equivalent, which is a footprint of 0.7 kilograms of carbon per kilogram of dry matter. That's a massive 30% reduction for the equivalent feed values and rates. Reduced cultivations. Previously, everything was ploughed. We now have a combi disc cultivator, which we are using in place of the plough, which has reduced fuel consumption on the primary cultivation tractor, but also on the drilling tractor as it's travelling easier and faster. Treating homegrown barley and wheat with a urea product to store moist and increasing protein levels by 30%, and also increases the pH to 9, which makes the cereals a safer feed for all the animals. This helps reduce bought-in concentrates and saves diesel from not drying the grain at harvest time. Mortality rates. I mentioned earlier that a cow mortality rate is now at 2%, and calves from 1 to 28 days is at 0.5%. Industry and supermarket aligned contracts set their levels at 5%, which a lot of farms are failing to meet. I really think that the farms need to start recording more about what is causing the mortality rates, and if they're experiencing the same issue time and time again, there needs to be something done about it. We did a year-long survey, along with some other farms with Arla and Aldi, to record the cause of each death, and it was really interesting to see where the pinch points were so we could address them. Calf rearing. We have really concentrated on calf rearing to give every calf, bulls and heifers, the best start in life as possible. All calves get fed colostrum within 4 hours of birth, no matter what time of day they are born. All calves born to heifers get frozen colostrum from cows. Between this and the new calf shed being away from any other cattle, it is paying dividends with less losses and more animals to sell. Breeding policy. Currently using a mix of sex semen and conventional British Friesian semen over the top 40% of cows, with the rest going to a limousine. I can see us going to 100% sex semen as the results between sex and conventional are getting very close. There is a lot more information coming from the semen companies now on feed efficiencies, which will be interesting to see the results from that. We're also looking at genomically testing all heifers born to breed from the better end of them. Another use of genomics would be to test all the current MPs in Parliament, and any below a certain level of common sense would be thrown out. But I do feel we may end up with an empty Parliament if we adopted that policy. We are currently doing the Arla climate check every year. Our 2020 score was 1.18 kilograms of carbon per 1 kilogram of fat and protein corrected milk. Our data has currently been entered for 2021. The average for Arla farms is 1.15 kilograms of carbon per kilo of milk, of which 0.48 is enteric fermentation and 0.42 is feed supply. So that's 0.9 kilograms of carbon out of the 1.15 is feed and methane production. So there is a massive potential to reduce our carbon footprint through feed alone. What's next? Arla have committed to reducing CO2 emissions by 30% to 2030 and becoming net zero by 2050. The average at the moment is 1.15 kilograms, which is over 50% lower than the world average of 2.5 kilograms. 93% of farms submitted climate data in 2021, which gives us a huge foundation to build on. We have identified 20 levers that contribute to ensure greater levels of sustainability at farm level, and they are as follows: lameness, mastitis, mortality rates, feeding fatty acids, optimising protein supply, digestibility of forages, waste, reducing diesel consumption, herd replacement rates, age at first calving, cover crops, genetic yield potential of new grass varieties, covering slurry stores, anaerobic treatment of animal manure, testing nutrient content of manure, artificial fertiliser requirements of crops, slurry strategy for clover crops, management of high-yielding permanent grasslands, timing of manure applications, and manure application methods. The big 5 levers that we see as the main levers to get to our 30% reduction by 2030 are herd feed efficiencies, protein efficiency, animal robustness, fertiliser use, and land use. The list could go on, and it's not one size fits all. It's down to the individual farmer to see what can be implicated on their farm, and we're all going to pick the low-lying fruit first. Fuel and fertiliser use over the next year will be reduced if current pricing structures continue. To sum up, without teaching Granny to suck eggs, it's a case of use more of what we have available on farm, find ways of producing more from the same, or producing the same with less. I will finish with this thought: the lower that your carbon footprint on farm is, the higher your profit will be.
Thank you very much. Unbelievably detailed and very, very thoughtful. Thank you. So I've obviously got a question to start things off, but before I get going, does anyone else have one they want to start with? Going. In which case, I'll ask mine then, while everyone thinks of one. So Arla have said you've got what's happening in the 30%, but they've then said they're going to be carbon zero by 2050. And I certainly don't understand how that's going to happen. I asked Scott, and he didn't know the answer. Apologies. So I was wondering, but that said, speaking to yourself before, it's very clear that it's a good marketing strategy for Arla, and they're being very successful from it, and it's giving you a better price for your milk. Do you have a feeling of how we can get past that initial 30% and to do the final bit to get zero carbon without offsetting, considering that's what we talked about?
Not really, no. There's lots of things coming online. We have, as I said earlier, we're not using any of the grass sequestration yet on farm audits. So when that comes on board, I think there'll be a reduction. And it's net zero through the whole production. It's not just on farm. They have Aylesbury Dairy, which is net zero at the moment now. It's the first net zero dairy in the world.
Do you know how? What are they doing?
They've got an AD plant for one. Using a lot of recyclable plastic, nearly 100% recyclable plastic. There's hardly any virgin plastic going into the milk bottles now there. So there's a whole raft of different things that's coming on board, and hopefully in the next 28 years we'll nail it.
I've got loads of questions, so jump in. But I suppose I mentioned about with people outside of farming, hospitality, and they're quantifying it and they're saying it's the business of sustainability. They're doing it because they can see a return on investment, as well as the fact that obviously it's the right thing to do. So, and you've engaged in this massively. There's a huge amount of time gone into this and fundamental change in the way you work. And for anyone else who doesn't know where to start or why to engage in it, from a financial point of view as well, what's the incentive to do this? Where's the why? Is it in increased milk prices, or I talk to a lot of people and there's a fear that it might be a penalty somewhere down the line. And it's we're talking about carbon, but why are we talking about it other than someone's telling us to do it?
Yeah, at present there's a €1 incentive on our milk price to do the carbon audits. It's given our milk buyer a competitive edge over other suppliers when they go to their marketplace, customers, supermarkets, etc. Yeah. They have a something else to offer over the competitors. And that's what the customer's asking for.
Yeah, driven by the bottom up, isn't it? People
Yeah.
making a decision based on that.
Two things that they're getting asked for at the moment is animal welfare standards and carbon footprint.
Which will go hand in hand as well, like you said. So they're increasing, so you get more for the milk, but as you said at the end, your closing statement there, you've also improved productivity on the farm, and engaging your carbon footprint will help you be more profitable, yeah?
Yeah, just as I said, efficiencies. If you're efficient in something, you'll make more money from it. If you can keep more animals alive, you've got more to sell at the end of the day. You've got less replacement costs, less rearing costs. You don't need to keep as many animals on farm. So the whole things just sort of go hand in hand together.
Okay, that's very helpful. Has anyone got any questions from the floor they'd like to ask?
I feel that when it starts, we put LED lights in, we've got some solar PV. If we extend the solar PV, we lose out on the feed-in tariff we got on the first batch.
Is it all through 1 metre?
No, we have a farm meter and a house meter.
Right, yeah.
Could you repeat the questions for them?
Yes, okay, sorry, yes, absolutely. Just to repeat the question you asked there, you've already made a start and installed LED lighting and some solar PV, which is getting the feed-in tariff. And the question was, can the solar be extended without losing the feed-in tariff? My understanding, yes, it can. If it's, let's say it's a 50 kilowatt system and it's on a feed-in tariff, you can claim that, and you can extend that with it's a separate inverter, or it goes through the same meter, but you just wouldn't get a subsidy for the extra.
So we get 40 pence at the moment on 25 kV.
Yep.
So we could actually take that to 50 at the new rate.
You could take that higher. Well, there is no rate at the moment. You're installing solar now because electricity is stupidly priced, basically, and it looks like it's that way to go. So initially, the solar was driven by the feed-in tariff, and that was a fantastic thing to do. So that system remains for the remaining years of the 20 years of the feed-in tariff. Now, if you're still importing a lot of electricity at certain times of day, or as battery technology comes online as well, and obviously a lot of people in this room use a lot of electricity through the night, then there's the opportunity to go back and install more solar, more efficient solar, to capitalise on those shoulder periods where you're not, where you are importing electricity. So yeah, it can be done.
Just to give you a brief addition to that, the initial feed-in tariff for the best rate you could have got was 43p, I think it started off per kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
There you go. The price last week you could sell your electricity, sorry, you had to buy electricity for was 44. I saw it at 55. So I can't believe the payback on a solar panel is anything more than 3-4 years at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, we have another question.
Yes, Tom, you came up with some very good figures for, that's exactly about 1 kilogram of carbon for 1 kilogram. You reduce more than we would have carbon based. Plant-based, I'd rather die dehydration before drinking it. But how do some of the figures for the plant-based alternatives compare? I'm assuming there's probably more carbon reduction. Why are we not as an industry chucking that more than we are?
Could you summarise the question then?
Yeah, so the question was, why are we not championing milk over plant-based foods on a carbon footprint basis? Some of the plant-based drinks have a lower carbon footprint per litre, but what we need to try and do is get a system in place where we're comparing them on nutrient basis. If we could get a nutrient basis carbon footprint figure for milk, it'll outstrip any plant-based basically water drink on a nutrient basis, and that's something that we're looking at, but it hasn't sort of became as a standard yet.
Any more questions? Do we have any more going on? Scott.
Ryan, earlier you talked about the carbon footprint of airlines and you talked about motor factories, that sort of thing. Farming is we're compared to that, we're producing food. So where in government policy do you see the rather than something that is not actually necessary to keep us alive?
Just to repeat that, so there's a question that lots of different sectors are under different pressures, but farming seems to be under more pressure than a lot of different sectors, and it's about how we engage with the public to remind them that farming isn't about just producing carbon. It's producing carbon at the same time as producing food, essential product, rather than something that might be classed as a luxury, non-essential good or service. It is difficult, isn't it? It's a perception. It feels to me from the outside that sometimes farming gets a bad rep because it's tangible, you can see it, it's on the doorstep, and the public are relatively disengaged and distanced from it as well, particularly outside of areas like Cumbria. I'm sure if you said to someone, if you had a choice between drinking milk, eating steaks, whatever it might be, versus going on holiday to Spain, and they might have a comparable footprint over the course of a year, people would probably still choose the holiday. And we might find a lot of this, especially now as prices increase and people's carbon consciousness and people's morals change based on price points and things like that. I don't know how we engage with the public to change that misconception that farming's bad, and I think part of it comes from a feeling that obviously rewilding's very popular, and this idea of going back to nature and people coming to the Lake District and thinking the Lake District is much more carbon friendly than all the dairy farms in amongst it and around it. And it's changing that perception and understanding that actually no one manages the land in the UK better than the agricultural sector, and more responsibly as well, and more carbon consciously as well. How, I don't know. That it's a bit of a politician's answer, but it'd be something for the room in how you change that.
Great. Sorry, over to you, sir.
I think everybody is missing the point entirely. You mentioned transport. Transport uses fossil fuel, it goes up in the atmosphere. Farmers recycle carbon. Methane forms water and carbon dioxide, which is taken up by the crops. So it's recycled. Transport, it's not. How is it we can't get this message across? I do, fertiliser is fossil fuel, but it does create more CO2 in circulation. So, I did see an advert, technology will save us. We're going to be able to produce nitrogen in a test tube or genetically modified crops, but I think the fact that we recycle CO2 rather than just pump it in the atmosphere, that needs to be brought across.
So just to sum that up, I think what you were saying is that the messaging the farming sector has delivered has not really been up to standard. It hasn't sold what we could do within the industry. And I think what you're saying here is we need to do better at it. Is that fair?
Yeah, I say we are basically a recycling industry. I'm not saying we're perfect, but compared to transport, that doesn't, that's the same difference.
I think we all agree.
Can I ask Ryan, I'm presuming there's no feed-in tariffs for new solar panels at the moment. How do they stack up financially now for somebody that hasn't invested in renewables previously?
It's that misconception that I mentioned before. People assume that solar can't pay itself back without subsidy. What people maybe don't realise is, take a 50 kilowatt system, for example. That was pretty standard 12 years ago when the feed-in tariff was at its peak. That system would probably have been around about £130,000. That same system now is somewhere in the region of £35,000 to £40,000. That's not installers making any different margin. It's just like anything else. It's like mobile phones or anything. As the technology improves and it gets picked up across the world, the cost of manufacturing comes down, the system gets better. We've got 2 panels on our stand and they're 10 years old. The same size panel now produces twice as much electricity per square metre. It doesn't need a subsidy. You've got a cost of a system that's come down by 2/3. You've got the price of electricity in the same time. I looked last night actually. In 2015, electricity was 7.2 pence. And that's when you needed a subsidy. Now that electricity is 35 pence a unit, it's a better payback, it's a faster return on your investment than it has ever been. And as you mentioned there, Toby, we're seeing solar on poultry units, a 4-year payback. On a standard unit, you're looking at between 4 and 6 years as a payback. But as the technology's got better, the warranties have got better, you're getting a 25-year performance warranty now. The system design needs to be better. It's not about fill your roof to claim the feed-in tariff, which was the reason it stopped, essentially. People got greedy and it came to an end sooner than expected. Now it's about sizing the system to meet your demand, to make you more energy independent. But there's no doubt, although getting the feed-in tariff means you get a bigger check, you get a bigger income at the end of the year, you're still getting the same return on investment now as you would have done 10 years ago.
If not better, I would say. Particularly if you're locking in your contract today, it would be a lot better than it was 10 years ago. And I would add to that, you should look at heat very specifically. Dairy spends a lot of time considering their heat, and I see a lot of people in my day-to-day using electric immersions for stuff, which is a disaster at the moment.
I think most dairy farms will have a heat recovery system in place from cooling the milk now. It's where to go next.
Okay, unless we got any more questions before we wrap it up? Is that a question? No? Go. Okay, in which case I'll draw it to a close. Ryan ran us through how to buy cheaper, buy better, think more about independence, and think about the energy as an input cost and how to decarbonise and reduce the cost. The two are linked together very carefully, and we need to remember that. Tom then gave us a really practical example of how to do it on farm and how to manage that within the cows. I have to say it was very detailed and very, very interesting. Thank you both very much for that. I think the summing up comment needs to be that we need to manage our costs. We really do. We need to decarbonise as an industry. This is obviously having a selling effect. It needs to capture the public's imagination, and we need to be able to deliver that message to the public. I think we'll probably agree we're all failing at the moment. I don't think the fault of anyone in this room, but I think we need to do better. And I hope groups like this and discussions like this will help us think about it more creatively and be publicly more aware. So thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.